Hello, welcome to the Well Watered Life. I'm Sarah Asdell, and we are back with another set of Christian biographies. And so today we're going to talk about Marianne Farningham, and Susan's just going to tell us her story. This is an interesting one. And so, Susan, thanks for being back here and sharing with us.
I'm so glad to be back here, Sarah. I wish I had a happy story to tell you today, but today's story is more of a warning than a joy. The book that I suggest getting is called A Working Woman's Life, an Autobiography. But this is a book, this is one time when reading a couple of books about the same person really helped. This is Marianne Farningham, or Marianne Hearn is her real name. Farningham was a pen name. And this was the autobiography, but this biography, Studies in Baptist Women, it gives different light. You know, when you tell your own story, perhaps there's a little bit more perspective that someone can get after your history reveals more details of the story. And so I suggest reading both of those if you like me are fascinated by this story. I was telling you earlier, it haunts me, this story, since I read it, her life story. But let me get into it, and then we'll talk about it. Marianne Hearn was born in England in about the same, if you want to picture the time period, think about Charles Dickens. He was her contemporary, okay? So it was the Industrial Revolution was in full force, and so people were coming in from the farms, especially young women, and for the first time they could leave their families and start working in manufacturing and in other jobs in the cities. And so the conditions were very poor. You know, think about Oliver Twist, how right. So at this same time in history, if we want to put some of our people that we've mentioned briefly, Charles Spurgeon was preaching, George Mueller was running his orphanages, Hudson Taylor had gone to China to start the China Inland Mission. Lottie Moon was also in China at this time. So that's a historical context for this story. So Marianne Hearn was born into a Baptist family, a very solid family. When she was a little girl, she learned all about Jesus, and Charles Spurgeon used to come and speak at her church every once in a while. She had a very solid background, a loving family who cared for her. When she was a little girl, one day she ripped her pinafore, and she didn't want to tell anyone about it. So she went to bed that night and she prayed, "Oh Lord Jesus, please fix my pinafore. Oh Lord Jesus, please fix my pinafore." Every once in a while, she'd get out of bed and measure the hole to see how big it was. And she convinced herself that he was working on it. And then she realized he wasn't, and she just sobbed. She was crying and crying when her aunt was staying with him, and she came into the room and gathered her up in her arms. And she asked her what was wrong. And she said, "God isn't fixing my pinafore." And she said, "Oh, honey, I'll fix it. God may have sent me just in this room for that reason."
Oh.
And it's such a sweet story, because the aunt was able to show Marianne how God really cared for her, and how he was answering her prayers, maybe not in the way she expected. And that pattern goes on through Marianne's life. You can see several examples of the way that God provides a way out for her when she gets into a difficult situation. The next story that she considers significant in her autobiography, her mother got very sick and was dying. And so she started bargaining with God. She said, "Please heal my mother." And then she said, "If you have to take one of my parents, take my father, but leave us our mother." And then she said, "If you must take my mother, then kill us all at the same time, because we don't want to go on with that." She's just a preteen. She's a little girl when this is happening. And so on Christmas Day, God took her mother. And her bitterness and resentment were overpowering. You know, she trusted God to answer her prayer. And since he didn't answer it in the way in which she wanted nothing more. She says, "I wanted nothing more to do with the babe of Bethlehem." That's at that point in her life, it was very serious. But her father still had her going to church every Sunday, and she would sit there resentful and angry and bitter until one day her Sunday school teacher, a single lady, a young woman, came and just took her hand and held her hand during the service with great compassion and concern. And Marianne said her heart melted. Somehow during that time, the bitterness drained out of her because she saw that there were other people that could love her too. Just that little act of kindness changed that little girl's life. So Marianne went on to start writing. It was Marianne Hearn was her name. She adopted the pseudonym Marianne Farningham and started writing. And she was submitting stuff to a Christian publisher. They did you remember we talked about Sunday schools before at this time in history. They were real schools. They taught people how to read, and they also had lessons, but they were using the Bible to teach people how to read, and there were broad range of ages. So Marianne started a Sunday school class for the working women in England, and her class started at 12, and it grew to several hundred people, several hundred women that she was teaching week to week. And so she was writing her Sunday school lessons down, and a publisher hired her to work in a newspaper. So there's a publication that was going out to, I think it was 13,000 people every week were getting the Sunday school publication, and she was the editor and she was writing lessons for it. So she just shot into fame. Everybody knew her name. She was the household name, and she was traveling around speaking. She was a very important person. Well, the Sunday school paper that she was writing for changed its theological view. And they told Marianne that she was not required to believe this, but their view was that it didn't matter whether things in the Bible really happened or whether they were, I'm so sorry, the word for that, not illusions, but metaphors. It didn't matter if they were metaphorical or true. Creation may have been a metaphor, it may have been a fable, but it didn't matter because the truth was below that. And they said, you're not required to believe this, but this is where we stand as our body. So her church was obviously alarmed at that stand. And at the same time, Charles Spurgeon was fighting the downgrade controversy. And so England was divided over these issues. Marianne, this book says Marianne was a feminist par excellence, that she was a groundbreaking person. What she really said was, I will leave the theology to the men. That's what she said. Someone else can figure it. Let's see. I will leave it to greater minds than mine to sort it out. I haven't the time. In another place, she said that. Wow. So she refused to engage. Men from her church came to her and said, there was a family that came to her and said, you may live with us and we will support you for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about money, but you need to leave this job. And she refused. See, that's how God provided for her one more time. And gave her an out. He gave her a family that was willing to support her through this crisis of faith. And she just refused to make any decision at all. And so she drifted into that other false belief. And so now Marianne's work, she worked her whole life. She wrote and she wrote, but it's worthless to the church. We can't endorse what she says. We can't learn from what she says because we can't trust her, because she allowed that to happen. She didn't make a decision. She refused to make a decision, and she drifted into failure. I don't know what else to say. She cannot serve the church as an example. She can serve the church as a warning that even as women, even as lay people, we have a responsibility to know what we believe and to cling to right doctrine. And we can't sit aside when the controversies of our day come up. We have to make a stand too. We can't just set aside and say, well, I'll leave it to someone else. Be careful. We have elders we can trust, but not everyone does. So I am so sorry not to be able to leave you on a better note.
Yeah. But you're right. It is a warning.
It is a warning. And her book was well written and compelling. And I feel like I knew her. And if I wish I could tell her. I wish I could have told her but I think people did. I think God always provides a way. And that maybe that's the takeaway from this. God always provides a way of escape. We have to look for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a couple things that stand out in terms of just, we have to know the Bible. We have to read it. We have to understand it, to study it, to talk with people about it, and get, understand what we believe and why, and be able to explain that and give a defense for the hope that we found. And yeah, that's important. And today, I think a lot of people are scared, to even speak out, and it's easier just to stand back and not think through the issues and know where you stand on things. Yeah, that's a good warning. I also think about that precious lady who came and sat by this bitter, little girl, and just the effect of that can have on somebody, just, that kind of act.
The simplest acts can be used so beautifully, can't they? We just don't know.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Susan. It's good to learn about Marianne, and to be able to take away from her life. I love how you are bringing these people to us that we've never met and can never meet, and but we can still learn from their life. So thank you again.
Sure, it was my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.